This podcast contains strong language and discussions about relationships and sex. It may not be suitable for younger listeners. This is the Sex in Singapore City podcast, and I'm Nixalina Watson. Hi, everyone, and you're back with my Sex in Singapore City, the podcast. I hope you're all okay, having a good week. This episode isn't super fun by any stretch of the imagination, but as per me, I will try and slot in some humour somewhere. Even thinking about making a joke out of it feels like effort at this point in time. The reason I want to do this episode is because, one, let's talk about mental health, shall we? Two, I know so many of you listening to this, males and females, are going to relate to what I'm going to say and are going to want to message me after and chat to me. So many people are going to be thinking, I never even pictured you in that way. I never even had any inkling, which is another reason why we should talk more about mental health. So, without further ado, this episode is living with an anxiety disorder. Specifically, GAD. Mine is generalized anxiety disorder. So I haven't really spoke about it or written about it. I did a blog, I believe, a few years ago in London where I wrote about what it was like. But let's talk. Let's talk. It's a lot better. So bear with me because we're going to go back a few years and we're jumping from Singapore to London, which I do a lot with my memories, but c'est la vie, expat life. So back in 2013, I had moved out into my own place. I'd bought an apartment and I loved it. I was single, mid-20s. Moving from the family home to my own flat was quite quiet and quite isolated, especially obviously as I was single. So I ended up getting a cat. I'm a huge animal person anyway, right? Like any animal. I mean, I will save cockroaches. Yeah, if they're on their back and their little legs are still moving, even though I know that they're dying because they're on their back, I kind of flip them over to try and give them one last hope of cockroachy fun. Whatever it is they do for fun. Total tangent there. So I'm an animal person. I got myself a cat because I've also grown up with animals. I find them very relaxing. So it was just me and my cat in the flat, wearing a hat, sitting on a mat. Okay, stop. And I was smashing blog life. Sex in London City was hugely successful. I had a full-time job in London as an editor of a website as well, beyond the blog. So by day, editor of a website, by night, blogger and press eventee, attendee, and just general wild child of London. I will say I was rather wild. So as far as I was aware, life was great. Apart from being single, which I didn't think was much of a struggle because I wasn't ever not dating. I was on all the dating apps and casual flings here and there, really trying to get a boyfriend, but never kind of worked. I was just oozing desperation, I'm pretty sure, with the men. And then my blog won its first ever blog award. And it was fucking the most amazing night ever. I drank a lot because I was super nervous. I don't really remember much of it, which is terrible. But yeah, I was voted the best sex and relationships blog in the country for Cosmopolitan UK magazine. I then, because I was then voted the top, got a lot of job offers coming in. And I took all of them on. Beyond my actual role, we want you to become our resident dating vlogger for this massive website in London. And then MTV EMAs wanted me to do a red carpet coverage for them. And it was in Scotland at the time, so it was only an hour flight from where we live. So I kind of basically said yes to everything. I was so happy and so excited. And then I went to the local shopping mall to get some supplies from a chemist, and I just felt fucking awful. I was so aware that I was dying, and I was with a girlfriend, and I kind of just collapsed on the floor, and I was like, I can't breathe. I think something seriously wrong. There's something seriously wrong. Oh, I think I'm dying. All I could think of was I'm dying. She then took me to the pharmacy section. Luckily, I was in a pharmacy shop, right? So they go and she needs sugar. They went and got me a bottle of Coke. And then trying to put on a chair with my head in my laps, trying to not faint and collapse. And I was convinced that something really bad had happened to my body. Maybe I was dehydrated to the point of organ failure. Maybe I was going into a coma. I don't know. So we go off to accident and emergency at the hospital. And it turns out physically, I'm fine. They do an ECG. Which is where they do your chest and monitor your chest. They took my blood pressure. That was fine. And they kind of gave me a pill, like a diazepam, like a Valium, to calm me down, which I didn't really want to take because I was just petrified of pills. So by this point, I have no idea what happened. I'm just assuming I had a funny turn. And I go back to work on the Monday morning. This was at the weekend. And then basically this episode keeps happening. I start to feel sick. I feel like I can't focus on anything. I feel like noises get really loud. So I'll be on, the train to work and I can hear everything. It sounds like, like I'm a secret X-Men, which was also an option in my head. But apparently fucking not, unless anxiety is a superpower. So I hear everything. Noises, people eating, forks and cutlery, and oh my God, and it just drove me nuts. And I couldn't focus, and I couldn't look at the screen anymore because it would flicker all the time, right? So this happened for a fair few weeks after this first episode. And then I eventually go to the doctor because I'm not getting any better. And I thought when I first collapsed in the pharmacy that was just drunk too much alcohol or didn't have enough sugar or didn't eat enough that day because my appetite wasn't huge back then. And then my head is feeling just as weird, and I'm so paranoid and scared about having another collapse episode that I'm running on constant overdrive and fear and panic that I'm then causing more fear and panic. So when I go to the doctors, he basically says, look, he does all the tests again. He says, I think you've got an anxiety disorder. And I wasn't having any of it. I was like, what? No, there's something physically wrong with me because that is not emotional. That is nothing but physical. I feel like I'm dying every day. So I refused to have any treatment for anxiety disorder. So he kind of did the old Dr. Rolly Eye thing. I'm assuming thinking she'll be back soon. And he sent me off with okay, let's try this, try some yoga. Just, humour me, do some exercise, stay off coffee, stay off caffeine, don't have caffeine before bed, whatever. A few weeks roll by, I'm getting worse and worse and worse. Bearing in mind that before this, I was the kind of woman that would be everywhere, that was always out. I was the light in the room. I could do anything and go anywhere. And I was now struggling to get to work. And I wasn't feeling any better. Things were just escalating very quickly. So one morning I tried to go to work and I was so convinced that the train was going to derail or that I could smell gas that I ran off the platform in some random station. I had no idea where I was. And then I had to wait for the next train to take me back home again and call in sick. And I called in sick a lot, actually, during that period. And I was so lucky that my company were and my boss and my colleagues were so amazing to me. But I was every day trying to go in. And every day I felt like I was dying and would try and then couldn't go in. And I was struggling sleeping. I would wake up with headaches. I would wake up with if I looked at anything, everything was always fuzzy. So I was always squinting at the TV and the laptop because everything was flickering. And it also made me feel like I was always swaying. I was constantly walking around swaying and feeling sick and dizzy. And crowds would freak me out because I'd also hear really loud noises everywhere. So I eventually go back to the doctor, okay, you win. And he says, okay, you're going to accept you have an anxiety disorder now because then that way it can help you. So he says we need to put you on an SSRI, which is a serotonin up in rehabilitated up to... Google SSRI for me, because I can never say that. And I know it's a form of antidepressant, basically. So it's a set of pills, different pills. You've got like Zoloft, sertraline, diazepam, Valium, that help people who suffer with things like anxiety, OCD, bipolar, depression. So it's a whole range of mental conditions, disorders. I'm going to say disorders. So he tells me to take one of these pills. I go home and say, we need to get you started with this is going to help. And I'm so jacked up now on my own anxiety that I convince myself that once I took that pill, I'm going into a coma, because I was so against being that kind of stigma, that mental person. Oh my God, you have an anxiety disorder, you're mental, you're crazy, you have to take pills because you're crazy. I've like grown up surrounded with that kind of stigma that when I took the pill, I went even more into overdrive. And within 20 minutes, I was having another collapsing episode. I ran to the bathroom, I was vomiting, but nothing was coming out. And I was lying on the floor. I called 999. I called the ambulance service and I was like, you need to get here. I'm going into a coma. I've taken a pill. I'm going into a coma. They turn up, do my ECG, sit me down with a sick bucket, even though I wasn't vomiting, calm me down. Yeah, you're actually okay. Blood pressure, okay. Everything's okay. This happened, me calling the ambulance about 3 times as well. Because I was so convinced that I was dying, that I needed help, and I was so alone at home as well. So I go back to the doctor. By this point, I think he's fucking sick on my face. And he says, right, we're going to put you on a tablet called sertraline. We're going to start you off as 25 milligrams. It's nothing. It's nothing. You won't feel anything. And I'm like, no, I can't. And he's like, I can't have alcohol. If I have alcohol and an SSRI, I'll get a serotonin overdose and die. And he's like, you won't. Okay. So he starts me off on this tablet, and he also puts me onto CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So I get a counselor, a therapist, and we start working on identifying the root of because you can have anxiety in different forms. So mine's generalized, but it could be health anxiety, like you're always worried about your health. You're always worried about dying, which, as you can hear, I have a strain of that. You can have social anxiety, a fear of being around new people, a fear of being in a room with people, a fear of going outside into crowded places. So there are different levels. So we start working on that, and then I finally settled in to take the serotonin. I had to move back into my dad's home for a week or so when I started taking the tablets, because I was so convinced that I was going to die and I didn't want to be on my own. And even then, I remember I moved back in and I couldn't go to work. So I had to take 2 months in the end, in total 2 months off work, because in my head, I'd gone mental. In my head, I'd lost the fucking plot. And I was like, I'm going to end up in an asylum. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and so eventually I'm living with my dad. I'm now trying to take the pill. I would go for walks in the woods to try and calm myself. It used to be my favourite place. Even then, I couldn't focus on the trees. The trees were swaying, or I was swaying. I was feeling sick because I'm swaying. I'm dizzy. I would want to try and focus my mind on blogging, but I can't look at the laptop screen. I was really upset. I had lots of pressure on stuff now I couldn't do. So I then had to basically cancel covering MTV EMAs. I ended up sending my sister in my place and her partner to do the red carpet section because I couldn't go, because I couldn't get on a plane to Scotland. I couldn't do it from London. I was a shell of the person I was before, is the only way I can describe it. And I lost so much weight. I stopped going out, I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I cut down coffee, and just concentrated. Every single day was a fucking marathon to get through. Take a tablet in the morning, try and do something that makes me happy. So I'd like go and walk to the nearest coffee shop and get a decaf toffee nut latte. That was one thing a day I did. Of course, my doctor said, like, cut down on caffeine, but you don't have to. He was even like, why don't you have a glass of wine, just a glass, and see if it relaxes you? But I was so irate at this point, so panicky, so concerned for my health, in such a bad place that I just didn't want any kind of drug. I didn't want anything. I kept thinking, if I have a caffeine overdose with serotonin overdose, I'm not going to wake up in the morning. So many times I thought to myself, I'm not waking up in the morning. And I didn't understand any of it. No one in my family and none of my friends have panic attacks. I'd never had a panic attack. So when the doctors explained to me, like, what happened to you in the pharmacy was a panic attack, I didn't understand. And that's what I think a lot of people are like. Unless you go through that, you don't get how physical it is. When before, if you told me about panic attack, I think it would have been, oh God, I feel really worried. This is like a whole entire take over your body, you shut down kind of movement. And you can't get your head around it because it's your head that's causing it. How fucking fucked up is that? And the more you worry and the more you panic about having a panic attack, the more you get a fucking panic attack. I mean, Jesus, like, that is so not fair. So I spent months in this state. I really did. I had to cancel a lot of work. I had to stop blogging. I cancelled a lot of external blogging stuff, all the events I couldn't go to. I couldn't go physically into my day job. I had to be around my family a lot, like babysit me. And I remember one day, before he put me on sertraline, he put me on diazepam, which I would never really advertise to go on because it kind of made me like a vegetable. So he was basically just trying to like calm me the fuck down. I think it might have been one of my episodes where I was in hospital or I'd called the ambulance. So diazepam just vegged me out. My sister actually took a day off work to look after me, and all I did was sit on the sofa and watch back-to-back Disney movies. Just back-to-back Disney movies. Half asleep, not asleep, half awake, not awake, just like a vegetable human. Yeah, it wasn't good. Literally being babysitted at like my mid-20s. But there is a light at the end of this anxiety tunnel. So I start to feel a bit better when I'm on sertraline. I'm on 25 milligrams. He then ups it to 50 milligrams. I start to feel really a bit better. I'm then having cognitive behavioural therapy. And my therapist works through what's going on with me and says, basically, you need to change your lifestyle. You are working yourself into this breakdown. And it got to the point where when I started to feel a bit better and I was going back to work and I was planning the press event, she made me show her my diary, my schedule. And she was like, look how much you've crammed in your diary already. Like, you have to have like 2 or 3 nights off to relax, to eat. And I'm like, no, because if I don't go to that press event, I'll miss out on that. And if I don't do this, and I need a night of blogging because I got to write up about that, product that was sent to me, and I've got to write about this. And she's like, you're literally going to go and do this yourself again. And ironically, what we discovered was my work ethic and my lifestyle choices was so severe in getting my brand to where it was that I drove myself into an anxiety breakdown. And when I reached the height of my career at the time, because I'm like, wow, I've just won a blog award, like, wow. Your brain kind of goes, yeah, but now what? And I didn't even realize that was happening. And it was so frustrating because I was now on the roller coaster. I'm like, right, fucking, I'm the best in the country. Right, let's go to all these events. Let's answer all these emails. And it was coming in thick and fast. And at that moment, my body decides to go, you can't even get off the fucking train. You can't even leave your flat. You can't even walk into crowds. And it's so debilitating, is that the word? For yourself when you're used to be in that crowd, having the best time of your life, and now you're crossing the road to avoid it because you just can't be around all those people. At Christmas time, So this had been about 2.5 to 3 months after this happened, I believe. There was a Christmas market on, which I used to love, and it was only down the road. And I went with my dad, and I made him walk across the road. We didn't even go into it because I couldn't handle all the crowds. I went into panic. That was so weird. And that's so frustrating. And then you kind of upload more guilt and shame onto yourself because you're like, what has become of me? And how the fuck has this even happened? You know, like there is no history of anxiety. I didn't even know anxiety could do that. I didn't even know anxiety was a disorder. So yeah, the whole experience was very frightening and very frustrating. And I spent a long time researching. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized other people knew people that were doing it or on these drugs, or other people who, you know, had been through this and come out the other side. And then the more I realized panic attacks were pretty common. So along with that knowledge and research, along with the therapy and along with sertraline, I got up to 100 milligrams, I think, back then. Along with all that as a combo, I became my former self. I actually really genuinely got over that whole period of my life. And it was, I think in total, if I'd say 4 to 5 months from that beginning episode at the pharmacist to getting back to feeling like a human and proper going, yeah, it's about 5 months. I think I was about 2 months flat bound. Where I was just stuck at home. By my own admission, I couldn't leave. I was just too much of a mess. And what's really frightening as well is you're so much of a mess that you can't leave your home, but then anxiety still gets you. Like you're watching TV and suddenly the TV's flickering, you can't focus and you feel sick and you're having an episode on your sofa. And everyone would always say to me, right, what was you thinking about at the time? I wasn't thinking about anything. I wasn't thinking, oh my God, the world's going to end and then causing it. I was, if anything, I'm usually thinking good things. So it made it even more frustrating because I had no idea where this was coming from. So I got back to work. I finally get my normal life back. I eased myself back into my blog events, press events, and I start finding time as well beyond work, beyond my brand, to do things like I want to do. I take up yoga and I do that once a week, and that helped me tenfold. And I really had to realign my life values, and that alone was hard because I wanted to be out all the time at every bloody event going, and I felt so much FOMO when I was like, no, I cancel, I'm not going to that, I'm too tired, or I need to proper sleep, or the therapist said I need to go out 3 times and so I can't, like, it was not easy, but it was like, fucking hell, no wonder, looking back, no wonder I got to that place, because I was just a Duracell battery fucking running on empty, and I burnt myself out. That being said, I understand as well that there must have been an underlying anxiety condition to get there in the first place, right? Because people could also go for like that work breakdown or, you know, like, burnout, but not have the anxiety that I had. So I had no idea that I was predispositioned. It's one of those, isn't it? That I previously had anxiety roots in me, living somewhere, I guess. Because I must have had it to begin with for it to come out the way it did. I've spent a long time doing a lot of research on this, years and years and years and years. And I've taken myself off sertraline in a controlled and professional way. You do not take yourself off drugs without consulting a doctor and working with a doctor. I've also put myself back on them as well when I've had really bad times, very, very stressful times. And what I've really felt I've had to get grips with living with anxiety disorder is acceptance. And that's another thing that I was working very hard against during my peak was if you accept the panic attack, if you accept the bad feelings, if you accept that wave of anxiety, it actually makes it a little better. But every time I resisted, oh my God, I'm going into it, oh my God, I'm going into it. Oh my God, I can't, I got to stop somehow. And I was always fighting this episode, this collapse that I was trying to avoid, that then made it even worse. So living with my anxiety disorder has made me have to accept that I have it, be very open about it and talk about it, make me realize that it's not the sum of me. It's a part of who I am. And it doesn't reflect me as a person. And I have to also change how I behave to accept that part. You know, like I can't really drink too much, even though I do. I can't drink that much anymore. It does send me into hangover alcohol shame the next day, which heightens my anxiety. I have to exercise. I need to keep my yoga up. I need to be happy taking sertraline if that's what makes me better. And that's what the doctor said. Look, this is going to help. You know, like I tried my hardest to avoid the tablet route, and I was part of the shame and the stigma. Oh my God, you've got to take pills for your head, you crazy bitch. I was part of that, and I fucking refused. And if I just accepted help a lot earlier, I might have had a speedier recovery, but I was such a stubborn little bitch. And I was like, no way, I'm doing this natural, and this isn't, you know, you're wrong. I genuinely thought the doctor had got it wrong. I mean, what do you know? He got it right, but whatever. I'm always right. So if anyone's listening to this story and thinks like, oh my God, I can really resonate with a lot of that, just know that the best way to deal with an anxiety disorder is to accept it's part of you, but not who you are, and kind of embrace it. Like, you know, like I'll make jokes about it like, oh God, I don't want to be a bit anxious, or I'm feeling a bit angst, or, you know, like, panic if I'm in a jokey mood, because I have to make light of it, because it's so scary if you don't. And people around you and the fucking internet, people making comments or whatever, I'm sure that who never had a panic attack, who don't live with anxiety, don't have a fucking clue. And in my opinion, the strongest people are the people that live with these conditions, because you don't realize how strong you have to be to have an anxiety and panic attack while you're at work. Then just go excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, calm yourself down all by yourself, even though your head, it's hard to step outside the box when you're in the box, and do all that by yourself, and then return back to your desk at work and carry on. That, to me, makes you stronger than anyone who doesn't have these kind of problems. So I guess like me being very open about living with an anxiety disorder, I'm hoping will help dispel any of the stigma attached that I grew up with, that I was so fearful about. And I think maybe if I had a more understanding when it first hit me, I wouldn't have been so severely affected, because I would have been more accepting and I would have gone, okay, I understand this. But I was, a fucking mess and refused treatment and called the ambulance and thought I was dying every day and thought I was like ready for a mental home. I was in a spiral of guilt and shame, like I'm broken, my head is broken, my brain won't return. It was dark, dark times. But they don't last. And that's another thing I want to make really clear for anyone listening. Always remember, this too shall pass. That's what always gets me through. I'm like, whatever I feel right now, this will pass. This will definitely pass. Everything passes. I mean, all the good stuff, unfortunately, also passes at the same time. But you are not going to feel like this forever. And I feel there will be bad days and good days, but once again, as a part of acceptance, so what? Everyone's got bad days and good days. Okay, so I have to take sertraline because I have an anxiety disposition. Okay, so what? So I have, a lack of a chemical imbalance in my brain, basically, where I don't get the serotonin that I should be getting. So I have to take sertraline to get that. People always say, well, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't walk around with a broken leg. You'd get it fixed by the doctor, and you would take antibiotics for a virus. Obviously not COVID. Let's not go down there. But you would take help and medicine to get better. And it's the same. Do not allow any stigma attached to anxiety, depression, or any mental condition to mean that you won't get help. because you don't want to be that person taking that pill. You don't want to be that person that has to go and sit in the Institute of Mental Health. Who fucking cares? If it makes you feel better every day, if you actually get up and go to work, if you have, that horrible cloud lifted off your head and things start to feel happy again, is that not worth it? So many girlfriends and also people generally on the internet will now talk to me about anxiety and about depression because pretty much I feel like I'm a fucking expert, but I also okay, I know where you feel. Then do this. This will help you. And I just wish that I had someone like that I could have spoke to every day that when I was going through the worst time in my life. So yeah, I'm here for you on that note. If anyone out there is worried that they might have an anxiety disorder, if anyone deals with recurrent panic attacks or has depressive spells or anything like that, or anything where it doesn't even have to be that spectrum. It could be, a lighter version where you just sort of listen to what I said and gone, oh, actually, I can see elements of that in me. Please do reach out to me. I can be like the big sister of the internet on this topic and help you. And also, let's point out one last obvious thing is anxiety disorders and depression doesn't attack a certain type of people. I'm super confident. I'm really loud. I have a no fucks given attitude. I believed, that I was like the party girl, the one in the room, and I got hit with it. So it's not, it doesn't anxiety doesn't go for weak people or shy people or introverted people. I think that's a whole other stigma that we need to dispel as well, because it doesn't. It gets pretty much to the most of us. And it happens for different reasons. Mine was obviously my work ethic and my inability to chill the fuck out. And on that note, I'm going to end this episode. But please do reach out to me, or if you're really struggling, please ring up the Institute of Mental Health and make an emergency appointment. They are always there. Or you've got helplines like the Samaritans and whatnot. You just need to Google it and you can speak to someone if you need super urgent help. Thank you. And yes, please do message me if you need me. I am always here. Thanks for listening to the Sex and Singapore City podcast. This episode was produced and hosted by me, Nick Selena Watson, and recorded at the Splicecast studio in Singapore. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and all major podcast listening apps. Do subscribe for a new episode every single week. Please do give us a 5-star review. It helps other people find our podcast. We're also on social media with Facebook and the Gram. Don't be shy, send me a message and come say hello. For more information and to read more articles, please do come over and say hey at sexandsingaporecity.com. That's sex and AND singaporecity.com.